Welcome to another Infographic Instant with Bryane. In this episode, we look at whether government and family participation in Malaysian firms leads to anti-competitive behavior. This infographic is from a paper that looks at the extent to which Malaysian companies can and should obey the competition law. Now, naturally, before assessing the quality of any legislation, you want to look at the data in order to assess the extent to which the harms targeted by that legislation exist in a country. So, for example, if we look at the data from Malaysia and we find that there is no collusion or price fixing, then we can reasonably say that the need for a competition law in that jurisdiction is not very high. So, turning our attention to the infographic, we see 5 trends in the data which do suggest that both families and government ownership represent a method of coordinating particular activities across firms which might be construed as anti-competitive behavior. The first trend in the data is that government ownership positively correlates with related party transactions. So that suggests that when government is involved in the ownership and management of Malaysian companies, that provides the opportunities for related parties to engage in some of the activities that we have talked about in a previous infographic. And in that infographic, we've noted the potential harms and the serious risk posed for anti-competitive behavior in these related party transactions. The second pattern that we see in the data are that there are decreases in assets with family ownership, assets particularly involved in related party transactions. So one possible interpretation of that correlation is that families do not steal from each other. The third trend in the data are that families seem to stuff Malaysian boards. So when a family is in control of a company, when they hold a significant ownership stake in a Malaysian company, we see a positive correlation between that and the number of directors on the board of those companies. The fourth trend in the data are that families don't seem to grow businesses as well as non-families. So looking at the level of assets or the level of debt of Malaysian companies, we see that when there is a significant family ownership stake in that company, the company is smaller. The enterprise value is smaller both in terms of assets and in terms of debt the company takes on, presumably in order to finance productive activities in the future. The fifth trend in these data are that families seem to interlock. In other words, when families control relatively large stakes of a company, we observe a statistically significant correlation in the number of interlocking directorates. And interlocking directorates, just to remind you, is when companies nominate each other's directors to their companies. So stepping back and asking what is the moral of this infographic, one possible interpretation is that family and government ownership of Malaysian companies serves as a potential method for engaging in anti-competitive behavior. Having families own stakes in different companies, or especially having government representatives own and manage different Malaysian companies, can serve as a channel of communication and a method of coordinating potentially collusive and price-fixing behavior. This has been another Infographic Instant with Bryane.